So this is a cycle that we have discussed. So throughout the accounts payable journey, right? So you should remember the entire proper cycle. Then it will be easy for you to understand or to connect the dots wherever you have. So we are going to discuss how to create a purchase requisition code, vendor purchase orders, GRN, how to receive the GRN, how to issue the GRN, and what kind of matching policies, invoice, how to validate the invoice, different types of purchase orders, cancellations of GRNs, how to do cancel, how to do any changes, and the payment entries, how does the payment happens. So all these topics we are going to discuss. This is a cycle. It starts with the procurement, PRQ, purchase orders, GRN, invoice, and payment run. If there are any damaged goods, credit note. So remember this cycle. So if you are clear with this cycle, this is going to be most important. It See, you have four cycles. When I say like cycle in the sense, the journey of the entire end-to-end process. General ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, fixed assets, cash and bank, and then tax module. So yeah. So also we have seen how to create the vendors as well. That is in the trial environment. Let me just. So in our legal entity, we have created vendor groups. That is the first step, because while creating the vendors, it will ask us to select the group. So that's the reason initially first we'll create a vendor groups which we already created, and then we have created multiple vendors as well. So we'll just create a few more vendors today, like two, three vendors. See, vendor might, it is not necessary that vendor must only supply goods. Even service related vendors will be there. So let's say for that matter, if you want to pay rent to your landlord. So in general, what is a journal entry to pay rent? That is rent account data to cash or bank account. Let's say if you wanted to create a purchase order or not purchase order, let's say if you wanted to pay in the form of vendor. See, anyone who's accepting the payments or anyone to whom we are paying the payment, right? So he can become our vendor itself. Even employees can become your vendors. Let's say if your employee, if you're taking services from one of your employee for business purpose, apart from the regular activities or regular tasks that he's doing, if you're purchasing some laptop for your business purpose and he's into or like any other product or any service for that matter, additional apart from the salary, if you're taking and you're supposed to pay, right? So even that also can be done through vendor itself. Any organization, anyone can become the vendor here. So let's say if you wanted to pay rent through rent to your landlord in the form of like instead of the posting a normal journal entry in the vendor form, here we'll create your landlord name as a vendor name. So let's say for example, so Satwa is a real estate or he's a realtor, like they're into corporate office, and if you're paying the rent every month, right, to this landlord, we have to record his name as a the builder name as a Satwa and group. So group is important, like but we have not created a group for this one. Right? Let me just create a group for the rent related or any operational expenses or any corporate expenses. We can create multiple such groups here. These for our reference. So far, we have created three groups: IT products, laptops, mobiles. So let's quickly create one more group for these kind of general vendors or something. I'll just give it as a corporate here. Any vendor expenses that you're paying for corporate expenses, right? I'll select it as a corporate group as a corporate. Again, these fields are not mandatory. Only if you have the details related to organization, employees, and phonetic name, collaboration. All these details are not mandatory. It is as per your requirement. Collaboration, again, this part of the supply chain management that we will discuss it separately. And address, the communication address of this vendor, email ID, contact details. So we can multiple purposes we have here. I'll just show you. And if you look at the purpose, we have multiple such in the drop down. Yeah. So business, consignment, delivery, fixed asset, head company. So for each and every vendor, you can have multiple such addresses, right? Like payment related. If you want to send an invoice, they might give you some other their corporate office address or any their accounts payable team address, and any it's unlading that again related to warehouse related. So they might have the warehouse address different, consignment address different, delivery address different, right? So we can create multiple such addresses here, and city, state, and if you have addresses, you can mention which is primary and which is not primary. So let me just create one sample address here. So let's say this is for invoice. So whatever the many invoices that you're generating or you're receiving from this vendor, let's say I'll give it as a invoice. So here we'll select the details of the address. Like so, as I mentioned, we don't have the count here. This is applicable for US countries. And if it is a primary address, I'll give it as a primary, or else you can remove this. So we can create multiple such addresses, and if you just click on add, it will take you to the place where you have to enter the details of the purpose of the address and the contact information of the vendor, like email ID, contact. So let's say if you have any email ID, support, and if it is a primary contact number, we can enable this one, or else if it is not a primary, you can add multiple contact details. And miscellaneous details, this is for the credit rating. For each and every vendor, as per your automation policies, if you're giving any credit rating, let's say, or if you're giving any limit for this vendor, like 1 lakh or 2 lakh. So beyond that 1 lakh or 2 lakh, you'll not be able to process any order, like we discussed in the last class. And here we have a controls as well. There's one more control, which is again most important. Whenever if you want to create, if you want to keep this vendor on hold for some various reasons, like for invoice all payment, we'll select the required one. And only for that activity, this vendor will be blocked, and will not the end user will not be able to create any invoice. In case if I select it as an invoice, here you can give the release date as well, only for short. I mean, let's say for 10 days, if you want to keep this vendor on hold, only for 10 days you can enable this option, so that post that the end users will be able to generate the invoice, or the invoice validation can be done. How about others? Is there any disturbance from my Arun, Radhika? Hello.
It's clear, sir.
All right. Yeah. So this is one such control, and then there's a credit rating again. If you have any intercompany transactions, enable this option to, for intercompany, and vendor profile is also not important. These all are just self-explanatory details. So only whenever you have any these details from the vendor, then you can enable this. If it is a small business, low client, all this will be in depth. It will be updated by the uh, supply chain management team. Only if they have all the details. These are not mandatory again. Even the purchasing demographics, this is again important. Like in case if you have any other primary contact for this particular vendor, we can create those primary contact, and line of business, employee responsible within your organization, who is responsible for this vendor, who is taking care of all the transactions related to this vendor. Select the employee who is responsible, and rest of the fields are also not mandatory. So all these details mostly, like if you have let's say if the vendor has if your organization has multiple segments, sub segments, all these details we can enter. You just need to give a right click, click on the view details. So most of the fields, whenever if you want to create, just give a right click and give a click on the view details, so that you can create a multiple segments again. And invoice and delivery. So as I mentioned, let's say this Satva is only a brand name. So their invoice name might be different, right? So their registered name will be different. So if you want to pay to their bank account, right? So their name might be different. The Satva might be only the brand name. So similarly, for each and every company, brand name is different, and the registered name will be different, right? So that for that reason, we can create a separate invoice account. Invoice account, again, it will take you to the same page, that is a vendor form. Let's say if they have any other registered name, just create one more vendor and you can select it here. See, we have already created the Redmi vendor, right? So that I can see it here. And if you want to give a separate number sequence again for this group, uh, give a right click again, it will take you to the number sequence form, where we can give the unique number for the transactions related, not transactions, like how to create the vendor. See, these are which are already there. So we can create multiple such unique numbers. And tolerance group, even these details are not mandatory. Like if you are excuse me, yes. Yeah. So here, if you have any tolerance, again, we will discuss these fields separately. Once whenever we come across any such scenarios where tolerance is nothing but, let's say, 5 rupees if you're purchasing one product from this vendor, and to what extent the difference. Let's say let's say if vendor initially accepted the purchase order for 5 rupees itself for each product, and later if there is a increase in the price, he is not ready to deliver the goods for 5 rupees. Instead of 5, he made it as a 10 rupees right away. So to what extent you can enable such, you can accept those products, right? So that will call as a tolerance. Tolerance is nothing but the difference, and we can create multiple such groups here, like tolerance related. Again, these are all for only for internal reference. It has nothing to do with the employee, sorry, in with the product price or anything. These are only for internal reference. And mode of delivery, delivery terms and conditions, if you have agreed 5 days payment, 10 days payment, all these details we will create it here separately in the payment setup, and then we can come back. Mode of delivery, like through ship, train, or any air. So what different types of mode of delivery you have, right? We can select that. This sales tax is important. Again, we'll come back to this once we configure the sales tax module. Whenever you are doing any payment to the vendor, we are going to pay the tax also, right? Like GST. So that GST again we have to set it off what with whatever the payments that we have received from the customers, and then the remaining balance, that is input tax credit, we are going to pay to the government. So let's say that in depth we'll discuss in the tax module. And purchase order defaults charges group, again this is related to the expenses and related to the vendor, like insurance, any labor charges, transport, all these additional charges who is going to bear, whether are we going to bear or vendor is going to bear. If he is going to bear, is he going to increase the product price? So there are multiple such charges group that we will discuss. We have, it's a separate topic again, we have to set up multiple groups, then it will show here. That is next to, yeah, about the payment setup we have a charges setup. And site and warehouse we had to create. So let's say for the example we might have a number of site and warehouses, right? So site and warehouse so basically these two are the places where we are going to receive the vendors, so receive the products. We have to create the site and warehouse. Like Amazon have a Hyderabad warehouse, and within Hyderabad they have a number of such warehouses will be there, right? So we have to create like for only for this particular warehouse, whatever the products that we are going to receive from this vendor, it has to be delivered into to that warehouse. Since this is related to some the rent related, right? So I will not select any of this, but if you have any site specific or site warehouse specific, we can select it here. And item vendor group. So even this is also like if you have a number is a different types of products that you're going to deal. In our example, if we are into SLV IT industries, right? IT product, IT services. So if you have multiple such vendor groups, item wise, we can create and we can select it here. So let's say if I just go to view details again, anyway we have to discuss. We'll discuss this in the product information management, how to add all these details. And purchase pool, even these also not mandatory. So most of the fields are not mandatory. Only if it is necessary, then we can create it and add it here. Purchase order, prices, amount, purchase calendar. So all this again, it will be used with some production manufacturing modules. And discount related, we will discuss this separately, like how to difference between the multi-line discount, total line discount, line discount group, and price group. So basically, these are again for the discount related, like uh, multi-level in the sense like let's say if you are purchasing some 100 quantity, 5% discount you are eligible, and beyond 100 to 100 to 200 range, you are eligible for 10%. So if you have a multiple multi-line discounts, we'll call it as a multi-line discounts. And if you have any such agreements, that will also call as a trade agreements, purchase agreements. So all these details again in depth related to the supply chain management, that we will discuss it separately topic wise. So we have to configure those separately here. Supplementary item group, even these also not required. And payment, this is like, yeah, this is important. The terms of payment, how do you want to pay to the vendor? Like within 5 days or 10 days from the due date, or due date from invoice. So these setups we are going to give it under payment setup. So here we are going to configure, then it will reflect here. And method of payment, like cash, bank, check, credit card, these details we are going to enter. Payment specification is also not mandatory. Payment schedule, again, these are optional. Like if you are doing the payment in terms of EMI, 5 months, 10 months, we have to create a schedule. Again, that is under payment schedules. That is under the payment setup. If you want to specify bank account of this vendor, select the bank account. And these rounding rules also not mandatory. So vendor type, style, prefix, these are related to variants. Like if you're purchasing mobiles from any of the vendor, right? So mobiles might have a number of variants, GB, RAM, and in terms of GB, RAM will be like 5 GB, 10 GB, and number of variants will be there, right? Colors, and then any other specification that will call it as a color prefix, site, style. This will call it as a variant. These again for your internal reference purpose only. That we will discuss once we create the products in the product information management. So we have to create multiple such products in the product information management. And if you want to link any of these particular vendor to any specific financial dimension, we will link it here in the financial dimension. And these forms are related to GST. If you have to pay, if you have an agreement to pay the GST, and what kind of vendor this is related to GST composition, all this related to GST module. Okay, so we will quickly create uh, 2 3 vendors. Let's say if we are purchasing from laptops from HP Lab, so I'll create the vendor name as a HP. So laptops, and rest of the fields, most of the fields I don't give it. Like later, if you want, we can update that one. Let's say if you're purchasing any mobiles for office purpose, then I'll select the group as a Apple mobiles. So we have created enough vendors. So then, yeah. So these are the topics that we are going to discuss, right? So we have discussed the vendor master, the terms of delivery, all these things, line of business, vendor post. So vendor posting profile. So that we will discuss separately, and the payment setup. Yeah. So we'll go one by one. So, so I wanted to show you the payment setup because payment setup will start with one by one. Then it will be easy. Okay. And then we'll go to the posting profile. And before that, okay, yeah, we'll start with the payment setup. First, we'll go with the methods of payment. And before that, let me just show you the USMF, the different types of methods of payment that we have, and then we will create it in our legal entity also. So these are USMF. Under accounts payable, we have a methods of payment. So these are the different types of methods of payment that we have. Bridging, that is again for the post dated checks, cash check, electronic payroll, PDC. So PDC and bridging, we will use it for the post dated checks only, that we'll discuss. Yeah. And credit card, Google Pay, Phone Pay. If you have any such many such payment methods, we can add it here. So let me just create it here like in our legal entity. So we'll start with the cash one. Let's say this is for the cash on delivery, and method of payment is in cash, and the period is most important here. So this period, it will help you- this the purpose of the period field is to, it will help you while running the payment proposal. So when I say payment proposal, let's say if there are 100 vendors and thousands of payments you have, we might have, let's say for example, and if you want to select the vendor based on the method of payment while doing the payment run. So method of payment, we have selected it as a cash. Let's say for example, Apple vendor. So Apple vendor, you we have to pay like monthly. By month end, if you have some 10 invoices. So out of the 10 invoices, in case if you wanted to, while doing the payment proposal, right, whether you want to club the entire amount. Let's say each invoice have some 100 rupees. 10 invoices have the total invoice amount of all the 10 invoices is around 1,000 rupees. If you want to club all the 10 invoice lines, all the invoices, and if you want to pay in a single amount, that then we'll select it as a total. Or else, if I give it as a total and if I do the payment proposal, by default system will pick up the total amount of that particular vendor, because the method of payment we gave it as a total. I mean the period we gave it as a total, and this we had to apply this method of payment, right, to the vendor. Let's say in the vendor form. Okay, we'll do one thing. I'll discuss this in depth in the this period in the payment proposal. If I tell, because we do not have enough invoices, so we will come back to this field once we get into the payment proposal. So till then, you just keep this on hold. But we have four different types: invoice, date, week, and total. These four are different again. So this is a cash on delivery, and grace period. It is not applicable for cash on delivery, because grace period, it won't have any grace period, or maximum you can give it as a 1 day. Because cash on delivery, it says that as soon as we receive the goods, we are supposed to pay it to the vendor, right? So maximum will give it as a 1 day. And payment status, this is applicable only for the check, whether we have received, sent, approved, rejected. Payment type, these other. Allow copies of payment is also not mandate. And these fields are related to electronic method and any other online methods of payment, where we have to select a separate main account and any promissory note related, payment related, payment account, which account here. So here the posting type I'll select it as a ledger, and payment account I'll select it as a cash account. Whenever you're doing any payments to this vendor, right? So which bank account, which main account has to get affected, that will select it as a payment account. Or if it is not mandatory, so anyway you're going to select a bank account, right? So we'll select it as the bank account itself. If you want to specify any separate main account, we'll give it as a payment account as a separate main account. Or here we have an option called bank account. So that we'll discuss once we have the cash and bank module, that like how to set up the bank. Once you set up the bank account, we'll give it as a bank account here. Even this file format is applicable for electronic reporting. We have a number of such electronic reporting formats we have. So in case if you're doing this payment to vendor, uh, let's say through electronic or net banking. So each and every bank, not here, like in Western countries, few countries have a separate format. Few banks have a separate format. So we'll have to generate, we'll have to, we are going to receive an invoice, or we have to send a statement, or whenever you wanted to pay, receive the statement, right? It will have certain formats, and D365 should support those formats. So accordingly, we have to set up. So in depth, we will discuss in the electronic reporting. So these controls or these fields are related to electronic reporting. So this payment control, again, this is related to cash or bank account, sorry, check related. So whenever we are doing the payment, that is cash or bank account, right? uh, Check related transactions, what kind of control that we can give it here? Either bank transaction type is mandatory, or offset account type is a mandatory, check number, all these details. Even this is also related to the check transactions. So once we set up the cash or bank account, then we'll come back to this fields. Anyway, we have to discuss what is the purpose of each and every field here. So let's say I'll give it as a credit card. So there is a limitation with the number of letters, so I'll select it as a CC. So here the period, again, we'll select it as a total. So even the credit card also, you're going to pay a monthly once bill, right? So we will select it as a total. Anyway, once we generate, multiple invoices, we'll come back to this. What is the purpose of this period again? Let's say if you have any grace period for credit card payments, or like if you have, then we can select it as a, the grace period we can give it as a 10 or 15 days, whatever the time period that you have. The payment status, again, these also not applicable. These applicable only for the check related. So even here, the payment type will select it as another. And if you have a specific payment account, the bank account will select it here. And one more method of payment is a check. So again, even for the check, if you have any grace period, we'll give it as a grace period of 20 days or 20 days. The payment status. So initially, as I mentioned, we'll not give any of this payment status. But while posting the transactions, we will select if it is a sent, received, approved, rejected. If you're receiving a check from the customer, right? So we will update the status as a received. So while creating in the method of payment, we'll give it as a none. While posting the transactions, we'll select the status. And this is related to the payment type is check. And if you have a separate bank account for this check payment, right? So we will select the bank account. And this bridging posting, again, this will be a part of this check itself. Once we have the cash on bank management, we'll discuss that. And we have something called as a electronic. So even here, although payment status is not applicable, this is applicable for electronic. The only method of payment type will select it as a electronic payment. So these fields are related to electronic payment. If you are paying it to multiple vendors, we have to share and report to the customer, the vendor report to the bank. Let's say for for 10 vendors, if you have 100 invoices amount, we have to send the details of each and every invoice and each and every vendor. So accordingly, bank will do the payment. So these fields are related to electronic reporting. And even the file format, as I mentioned, this file, there will be separate set of the format, right? So that format we have to select it for the method of payment. And these are not applicable for electronic payment, the payment control and the payment attributes. Yeah. So any other doubts here with methods of payment? Others? Ismail, Sridhar, Siddhir, Arun. Hello. Okay, so we'll continue for the next topic. So we can create multiple such methods of payment. Yeah. So we'll see the payment days. So let's say, for example, if you want to do, so these payment days are again this is used to calculate the due date. Let's say today we have received an invoice that is on 25th September. We have received an invoice from the vendor for the products. But when do you want? What is the due date? Let's say if you're 10 days or 5 days or the payment due date, right? So accordingly, we have to select it here. Or this is for our internal. Let's say if our organization policy says it, every 10th day you are supposed to do the payment. I'll select it as a 10th. So irrespective of any of the date you have received the invoice, irrespective of the invoice date that we are going to receive, as per our company policy, we will be paying the vendor only on the 10th of the every month. Let's say today I have received invoice, and even till, let's say for example, October 9th, from 25th September to October 9th, any invoices that you're going to receive, that we will be paying it only on the 10th. So we are not going to pay in any of the before 10th. So because this as per the organization policies. And if you want to assign this payment date to the customer, the vendor, then here in the vendor form we have a payment day, right? If you remember, sometime before we saw one field that is in the payment attributes. So we have to select the payment days. So these are description, and then here we have an option that is under the payment day lines. We have to define what is it. We have decided 10th day of every month. So here I'll select it as a month. So here we'll give it as a 10th. We can create multiple such payment days. Let's say, for example, if your policy has some Friday, every Friday you are going to do the payment. So that means if I receive any invoices that is from Saturday, that is 23rd to till 28th September, we'll be doing the payment on 29th, and this cycle will continue. That is for next till next Friday. Any invoices that you're going to receive from the vendor, will be doing the payment. So here I'll select it as a week, since this is not a monthly. So this is a weekly wise, right? So here we have an option that is weekly, and day of the week will be Friday. And let's say we can give multiple such payment days as well. Let's say, like, every, if your organization says every 15th and 25th. So I'll select it as a 15th and let's say 30th. So let's say if your organization policy has a policy to do payments on every 15th and 30th of the month. So let's say here I'll give it as a month. So now these two are applicable for the vendor. So whenever we do the payment proposal, right? So his payment will be done either on 15th or 30th. Again, it depends on the invoice date. So let's say if he has received, if we have received invoice on 16th, so his payment will be done on 30th itself. And any day if we have, let's say if he is going to send invoice post 30th, that means from 1st October to till 14th October. So his payment will be done on 15th. So this is a cycle that we are going to process. So similarly, we can create multiple such payment days here. Yeah. So these two are again the part of the payment setup. The methods of payment we have seen, the payment days. Now we will see the terms of payment. So terms of payment, again, this is for the calculation of due date. So first we'll go with the standard one. Let's say fifth day of invoice. So what do you mean by fifth day of invoice? So any invoice that we are going to receive. So irrespective of the date, within 5 days, that is on the sixth day, invoice plus 5 days, right? That is on the sixth day we are supposed to do the payment. And method of payment, sorry, payment method. How do you want to do the payment? So if I select it as a net, so it calculates, let's say for example, so today we have received the invoice. So from today plus 5 days, that is 3 plus 5. That means sixth day, right? So total invoice plus 5 days. So 30th, he is supposed to receive the payment. So if I select it as a net, and by default, so here we have to say, mention the number that is fifth. So invoice plus 5 days. On fifth day, he will be in our payment run. The invoices will be added. And these payment schedules, again, we will discuss it separately because we have to configure the payment schedules and then we'll come back here. So payment day, again, we have decided, we just know we have configured it. So let's say this is a fifth is the due date. And we have an agreement with this vendor that every fifth day we are going to, I mean, on invoice plus 5 days, we are going to do the payment. Apart from that, if you have any other agreement that irrespective, I mean, instead of this fifth, along with, let's say like it's a second due date, right? And we can give select it as a second due date, that is 10th day of every month or every Friday. So whichever is earlier. So whichever is earlier. So let us not select this payment day because here in our example, we are going to do payment that is every fifth day of the invoice. So ensure that you're selecting it as a net. The purpose, we will discuss this one by one. Net plus 5 days. The net in the 25th September plus 5 days. And the standard terms of payment, that is cash on delivery, that I'll select it here. So here the payment method, I'll select it as a cash on delivery. And for this, no such no grace period or no such days, number of days, nothing is applicable because it's direct cash on delivery. If you're receiving the payment, sorry, if you're receiving the goods from the vendor, immediately we have to do the payment. And this is for the cash payment. So in the next class, we will discuss the purpose of each and every payment method here. That is current method, current quarter, current year, current week, and what is the cutoff day, everything.